There comes a moment in every life where the old narrative no longer fits. Like a garment that has grown too tight or a mask that suffocates, the story we've told ourselves begins to crack. This is not a tragedy. This is an invitation, an inner summons, a call to rewrite your story, not as a lie, not as an escape, but as a conscious act of reclamation. We are not bound to the first version of ourselves. The psyche is not a rigid script. It is a living manuscript ready to be revised, deepened, and reborn. The wound is where the rewrite begins, not after healing, not once things are perfect, but exactly where it hurts the most. We are conditioned to hide our pain, to mask it with strength or numb it with distraction. Yet what we often fail to realize is that the wound is not the end of our story, it is the threshold. The crack in the surface is not a failure in the structure, it is an opening, a portal into depth. When life breaks us, it is not because we are unworthy, but because something deeper is being asked of us, something truer, something more real. Pain strips away pretense. It dissolves the identities we cling to and forces us to confront what lies beneath. In the middle of suffering, the ego has no more ground to stand on, and for a brief, terrifying moment, we touch the rawness of the soul. And it is here, in that vulnerable space, that something remarkable can happen. We begin to see with new eyes. We begin to ask different questions, not why did this happen to me, but what is this showing me about who I truly am? The wound begins to speak, and if we are willing to listen, it offers wisdom that cannot be found in books or borrowed beliefs. The stories we tell ourselves about our wounds often keep us imprisoned. We repeat internal narratives like chants. I was betrayed, therefore I am unlovable. I failed, therefore I am not enough. I was abandoned, therefore I must always be alone. These are not facts, they are interpretations, written by fear, by shame, by the wounded parts of us that never felt safe enough to feel. To begin rewriting our story, we must sit with the wound, not to wallow, but to understand. To tend to it like sacred ground, to honor it not as a curse, but as a signal that something vital was touched, something in need of integration. The wound becomes a source of strength, not when it disappears, but when it is alchemized, when it is seen, felt, and given meaning. The scar does not erase the pain, but it tells us that we survived, that we adapted, that we were shaped by something larger than ourselves. The pain you carry may be your most honest link to your own humanity. And when you allow it to guide you inward, it does not drag you back. It draws you closer to the truth of who you are becoming. You do not rewrite your story by pretending the pain never existed. You rewrite it by allowing the pain to reveal its hidden gift. In that wounded space lives your deepest sensitivity, your fiercest compassion, your sharpest insight, your unapologetic authenticity. The wound is not your enemy, it is your oracle. And when you turn toward it with courage, you discover that the place you once tried to bury becomes the very ground from which your new story can rise. The past is not a fixed monument etched in stone. It is a myth you continue to choose, often without realizing it. We treat memory as if it were a camera, capturing objective facts, but memory is not a recorder. It is a storyteller, and like all storytellers, it selects, edits, distorts, and dramatizes. What you remember is not simply what happened, but how it was felt, how it was interpreted, how it was filed into the narrative you've carried about yourself. We do not just remember, we relive. And in reliving, we reinforce the old plot. The betrayal becomes the proof that we are unworthy of trust. The failure becomes the evidence that we were never meant to succeed. The abandonment becomes a recurring echo, shaping our expectations of every relationship that follows. The story hardens not because it is true in some eternal sense, but because it has been rehearsed so many times that we mistake familiarity for fact. But what if the past is not the anchor you thought it was? What if it's a symbol, alive, dynamic, capable of being reinterpreted? To see the past as myth is not to deny that real things happened. It is to recognize that events alone do not define us. The meanings we assign to them do. And meaning is not static, it evolves as you evolve. The version of you who lived through that moment had only a fragment of the insight you now possess. With each layer of growth you gain a new vantage point, a broader, deeper lens. The story you told yourself at 5, at 15, at 25 was not a lie, but it was incomplete. And here is the silent power you hold. You can revise the myth, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by realizing it happened for something. Maybe the rejection was not a mark of your unworthiness, but a divine redirection. Maybe the failure was not an end, but the very pressure that forged your resilience. Maybe the heartbreak didn't shatter you. It opened a part of you that was closed. To rewrite your story, you must first challenge the version of the past that has claimed authorship over your identity. You are not obligated to keep believing what no longer serves you. The past can be a teacher without becoming a tyrant. When you stop clinging to it as the ultimate truth and begin to engage with it as a myth that can be reinterpreted, you free yourself from its grip. You step into authorship. You begin to write not from inherited pain, but from awakened presence. And so, each time you revisit the past, ask yourself, is this memory guiding me or governing me? Am I learning from it, or am I living in it? Because you are not just the character in your story. You are the narrator, the editor, the visionary. And you can choose again and again to tell it differently, not to change what happened, but to change who you are becoming because of it. The story you tell yourself is never written by the light alone. It is shaped, in large part, by what you refuse to see. The shadow, the unacknowledged, unwanted, and often feared aspects of your psyche, holds the pen far more often than you realize. It scripts your reactions, steers your patterns, and colors your perceptions. You may believe you're writing your story from clarity, reason, or even strength, but when the shadow is disowned, it does not disappear, it writes from the dark. The shadow is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is simply the parts of yourself that you have pushed away. Your rage, your shame, your sensuality, your ambition, your grief, your selfishness, your fear. Not because they are inherently wrong, but because at some point you were made to believe they were unacceptable. And so you buried them, you cast them into the unconscious, hoping they would stay silent. But silence is not absence. What you bury does not vanish, it waits. It waits for the opportunity to emerge, not with subtlety, but with force. You may wonder why the same cycles keep repeating, why certain relationships collapse in similar ways, why success always slips through your fingers, why you sabotage your own joy. These are not random events. They are the handwriting of the shadow, carving itself into your life in hopes of being seen. The more you resist it, the more chaos it creates, not because it seeks your destruction, but because it seeks your attention. The shadow longs not to control you, but to be integrated by you. Until then, it will keep writing your story in symbols, in projections, in patterns that scream for your awareness. To truly rewrite your story, you must invite the shadow into the room. You must be willing to face what you have denied. This is not a gentle process. It is a confrontation with your inner contradictions. But in doing so, you recover something profound. You retrieve your vitality, your complexity, your humanity. You begin to write not as a half self, polished and performative, but as a whole being, flawed, raw, and real. When the shadow is acknowledged, it becomes a source of power. It reveals your unmet needs, your unexpressed desires, your hidden talents, your truest voice. The very qualities you feared would destroy you often hold the key to your authenticity. The anger you suppressed may be the fire that sets your boundaries. The envy you buried may point to your unlived potential. The vulnerability you avoided may open the doorway to intimacy and connection. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming honest. The rewritten story is not a fantasy. It is a sacred integration. It is what happens when you let the rejected parts of yourself take their place at the table, not to dominate the narrative, but to enrich it. Wholeness is not achieved through denial. It is born through inclusion. And so, when you feel resistance rise, when a part of you recoils, criticizes, lashes out, or shuts down, pause. Ask yourself, whose hand is holding the pen right now? If it is the shadow, do not snatch it away. Sit beside it, let it speak, listen. Not all of it will be pleasant, but much of it will be true. And in that truth, you will find the voice of a self you've long abandoned, asking not for control, but for return. When you write from this place of inner reconciliation, your story changes, it deepens, it breathes. It becomes yours in the truest sense, not a borrowed script, not a mask, but a testament to the courage it takes to become whole. We are conditioned to seek meaning in endings. We crave resolution, closure, the moment where everything makes sense and the pain is finally justified. It's why we rush to conclusions, cling to interpretations, or wait for a final breakthrough that never seems to come. We imagine our lives as linear stories, beginning, middle, and a clear ending that redeems it all. But the psyche does not move in straight lines. It moves in spirals, cycles, and symbols. And meaning rarely appears wrapped in a neat conclusion. It reveals itself in the middle, where the path is unclear, the outcome unknown, and the soul is in the fire. The middle is the most uncomfortable part of any journey. It is where we are stripped of certainty. The old story no longer fits, but the new one hasn't yet formed. It's the in-between, the liminal space, where we feel most lost, most fragile, most tempted to turn back or numb ourselves. This is precisely where the transformation occurs. Not when we finally arrive, but when we endure the unraveling. The middle is the crucible where identity dissolves, and something deeper is born, not through clarity, but through the willingness to stay with the confusion. We often mistake the middle for failure. We think, if I were doing this right, I wouldn't feel this stuck, this uncertain, this afraid. But the middle is not a mistake, it is the necessary passage. It humbles the ego, it quiets the illusion of control. It brings us face to face with our shadows, our unmet needs, our deepest questions. And in that fertile tension, between what was and what will be, a new story begins to take shape. Not one crafted by strategy or perfection, but one authored by surrender and truth. Meaning forged in the middle is not always immediate. It may come in dreams, in synchronicities, in sudden insight that breaks through after long silence. It may emerge years later, when you look back and realize that the most disorienting seasons were also the most formative, that the loss you thought would destroy you actually revealed what truly matters. That the waiting, the stillness, the not knowing, were not empty, they were sacred ground. They prepared you to receive what you weren't yet ready to hold. There is a quiet wisdom that grows only in the middle. When we stop trying to skip ahead, we begin to listen differently. We hear the whispers of the soul, the subtle shifts, the inner realignments that don't make headlines but move mountains. We begin to recognize that growth is not always visible, that healing doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, the most important chapters are the ones where nothing seems to be happening, yet everything is being rearranged from within. And so, if you find yourself in the middle, where things are murky, unresolved, aching, do not rush through it. Do not force the ending. Let yourself linger, let yourself listen. This is not a delay, it is the initiation. The middle does not offer certainty, but it offers depth, it offers truth. It offers the possibility that the meaning of your story is not waiting for you at the end, but is slowly being born in the very heart of your becoming. You spend so much of your life searching outside yourself, for signs, for meaning, for someone to arrive and tell you who you are meant to be. You look to stories, to saviors, to systems that promise clarity or redemption. You imagine that one day something, or someone, will come and illuminate the path, resolve the inner turmoil, and crown your life with purpose. But nothing ever truly satisfies, because the truth is more intimate, more humbling, and far more powerful than you've been led to believe. You are the myth you were waiting for. There is no external figure, no perfected archetype, no final version of yourself who holds the answers. The myth you seek has been unfolding within you all along, in your struggles, your desires, your contradictions, your longing, and your dreams. You are not simply a character in life's drama, you are the living embodiment of an ancient and ongoing story. Every choice you make, every fear you confront, every truth you speak becomes another line in the sacred script only you can write. This realization requires a profound shift. It means letting go of the fantasy that salvation comes from the outside. It means turning inward, not as an escape, but as a return. You begin to notice the symbols moving through your life, not coincidences, but calls. The heartbreak wasn't just pain, it was initiation. The failure wasn't just loss, it was refinement. The darkness wasn't punishment, it was the forge. Everything you've lived has shaped you into a vessel for something utterly unique and irreplaceable, your own mythic essence. You are not here to mimic someone else's journey. You are not here to fit into pre-written roles. The old maps may have brought you this far, but at some point they begin to blur, and that's when you must look to your own soul for direction. The images, the emotions, the dreams that rise within you, they are not random. They are messages from your inner world, fragments of a deeper truth that seeks expression through you. To become the myth you are waiting for is not to become grand or flawless, it is to become real. It is to walk with the awareness that your very existence carries meaning, not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are becoming. Your joy, your pain, your voice, your presence, they matter. Not in a superficial, motivational sense, but in the deepest, most archetypal way. The cosmos expresses itself uniquely through you. The soul of the world breathes through your becoming. You do not need to be more of anything. You need only to listen more deeply, to live more honestly, to trust what stirs within you even when it challenges everything you've known. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to define you, you begin to reclaim your story, not as a passive witness, but as the active myth, maker of your life. Every day becomes a sacred act of authorship. Every breath becomes a declaration, I am not waiting anymore, I am here, I am the one. And when you live from that place, when you step into the center of your own myth, you not only transform your life, you offer others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, a lighthouse, a reminder that the answers we seek do not live in borrowed roles or external validation. They live in the courage it takes to look within, to embrace the chaos and beauty of our inner world, and to say yes to the myth that has always been waiting to be lived through you.